So my name is Janet McKithen. I'm a member of the steering committee of the Committee for Racial Justice, and I welcome you here tonight. I am very excited that you're here tonight when you could have been anywhere else. You could have chosen, but you chose to be with us, and we're blessed and honored that you did so. We especially welcome you if you are joining us for the first time. We want to let you know and to remind others that we didn't begin by sitting down and forming a committee for racial justice. We began on May 4th, 2011, when an African-American member of the Santa Monica High School wrestling team was strapped to a locker by two white teammates while there were chants of slave for sale and a noose with a brown dummy was hung nearby. And there was a cover-up then for 3 weeks. This racially charged incident was the catalyst for the formation of the Committee for Racial Justice. Within just a couple of weeks, we held a community workshop where Reverend Jim Lawson spoke and where we formed action teams, each with a different focus to address anti-Black racism. CRJ consists of parents and students at Santa Monica High School, students, community members, and religious leaders. We have held monthly community workshops for 11 years now, most of the time at Virginia Avenue Park. We are involved with education, with the courts, with the police, with the city, with faith communities, with food, with housing, etc., as systemic racism touches all aspects of life. Our mission statement is as follows. With the conviction that all human beings deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, we are committed to combating all forms of racial injustice, whether covert or overt, whether individualized or systemic, that take place in our community. While racism affects many cultural groups, we especially are drawn to focus on the severe impact it has on the African American community. A word about tonight. Anti-racist work involves confronting barriers to make real change. The barriers spring up in all kinds of uncomfortable places. We all know that far too many Black people are hurt or killed by police officers. But what happens when you try to make even tiny steps to address this issue? In Santa Monica, as everywhere else, the barriers that spring up are strong and well supported. The truth is often intentionally kept from the public, ostracizing those who work for change. It takes courageous leaders who are concerned about equity more than their own elections to move the needle forward. It's important to ask in this town, who is running this town, especially in preparation to vote for city council members, school board members, and a number of other offices. It's not just an inquiry into individual personalities and their priorities. Answering the question, who is running this town, involves knowing something about the roles of culture and power and fear in our own community. Our panel tonight will be George Brown, Angela Scott, and Dr. Karen Gunn. If questions pop up for you while they're speaking, please send them to Robbie Jones or me in the chat. After they have one round of speaking to you, we will circle back and we will be looking ahead to the future and what we can do. I again welcome you to the Committee for Racial Justice. And Robbie will introduce our first panelist.
Okay, so yeah, tonight we have 3 panelists, and our first up is someone who is very near and dear to me. I really have grown to respect this person, and this man is just done wonderful things to me in Santa Monica, in my opinion, rather. I feel that he's done wonderful things for us and continues to. And so without further ado, I shall just say George Brown, attorney and former chair of our Santa Monica Public Safety and Reform and Oversight Commission. And that's where I met him when we were beginning the creation of this commission. And so he also is currently executive director of the Stanford Center for Racial Justice, who has a monthly newsletter that I think we put the link in the chat. You know, George has advocated for social justice throughout his career, including focus on voting rights, civil rights, and was co-creator of New Era in Public Safety, a guide to fair, safe, and equitable community policing, published in 2019. He's also taught at UCLA, UC Berkeley schools, and served on several nonprofit boards serving youth, and is currently on the board of Children's Hospital. His resume is much longer than that. And so I just encourage you, if you'd like to know more, to Google Mr. George Brown.
All right. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Robbie. One of the things I wanted to point out at the beginning is I've been at the Stanford Center for Racial Justice for just over a year now, and one of our projects involves telling the stories of racial justice reform efforts post-2020. And we decided to start with police reform in Santa Monica, and we have a comprehensive case study and set of materials on our website. And we're going to put in the chat some links to various pieces of that, and I hope you all will take advantage of that. And some of the things I'm referring to tonight, you can find more information about on our website. All right. I have 4 topics that I want to address. First, a brief reminder about why police oversight and reforms is an important policy goal in Santa Monica. Second, oversight and reform efforts have been blocked and frustrated over the past 2 years, and I'll tell you how. Third, I'll offer some explanations and reflections about what forces are causing the frustration of efforts to implement the intended policy goals. And fourth, after the other panelists speak, we'll circle back and offer some thoughts about what needs to be done to move forward. All right, so first, why does Santa Monica need independent oversight of its policing? Here's a short list. There's been a history of incidents between the Santa Monica PD and Black and Brown people that at the time of those incidents received a lot of attention, imposed community trauma, and yet have never been resolved. In addition, there's statistics and data that SMPD has showing disproportionate rates of stops, citations, and arrests for Black and Latinx people. And this data has never been discussed with the public in any meaningful way. Third, SMPD revealed many internal problems on May 31, 2020, during its mishandling of the post-George Floyd peaceful protesters in Santa Monica in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. These problems have not been fully and properly addressed. That same day, the SMPD failed to protect Santa Monica businesses from systematic looting and damage to businesses throughout the city. In addition, the Santa Monica Police Department is the largest city department with an operating budget of over $100 million. And finally, there are more, but I'll stop here. The SMPD has failed to engage in meaningful dialogue with the people most impacted by policing about the issues that are most important to those groups. Now, let's talk about how independent oversight and reform has failed so far, in my view, over the past few years. In my essay, part 2, which you can find that occurred, I call them ignore, deny, delay, dispute, starve, and taint. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to talk about 3 of those. So first, ignore. Exactly 12 months ago, the Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission created and unanimously adopted a report reflecting the Commission's views of the events of May 31, 2020, and the issues that needed to be addressed by the Commission and by the City Council and city leadership. The city ignored it. The city manager ignored it. The City Council ignored it. Not until an ad went up in the Santa Monica Daily Press several weeks ago did it get added to the City Council's agenda. Consequently, there's been a lost opportunity to immediately address the numerous issues, questions, and concerns raised in that report. Second, dispute. The local police union, the POA, Police Officers Association, has been using a variety of legal tactics to kill the commission. They brought a lawsuit seeking to block them from operating. The interim city attorney negotiated a settlement of that lawsuit that weakened the commission and undermined its independence. The city council approved that settlement in closed session. The activities of the union have damaged the ability of the commission to be effective. Third, taint. The independence of the commission has been undermined in several ways, hobbling its ability to pursue the stated goals listed in the ordinance. That commissioners have been appointed who blatantly state that they don't agree with the reform goals of the ordinance. Some commissioners have been appointed based on behind-the-scenes influence of forces opposed to reform and oversight, according to widely circulated and circulating community talk and rumors. The settlement of the union's lawsuit resulted in an additional commissioner, supposed to be non-voting, being added to the commission, who's explicitly selected by the union and the police chief. Yet after appointing that non-voting POA member, there have been repeated attempts to change that person's status to a full voting commissioner. Now, tainting the commission with members who are not independent or not committed to the mission stated in the ordinance has damaged the ability of the commission to do its job. Okay, my third topic tonight is, what are the forces that help explain the resistance? In my essay on this, also linked in the chat, I identify roughly 4 explanations for the resistance, but undoubtedly there are more, and they're all complicated and interlinked. First, a toxic local political environment combined with a sudden shift in city council makeup made resistance to reform more possible. In November 2020, a change slate was elected to the city council, adding 3 new members and pushing out some incumbents. It turns out that those 3 new council members have not been enthusiastic supporters of the Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission and its goals, and some of them may have actively worked to undermine the commission. In May 2021, and hello, former council member McEwen, in May 2021, long-term city council member Kevin McCown retired, and his replacement changed the balance of support for independent oversight and reform, in my view. The council meetings also became more contentious, with personal attacks, accusations of ethical violations, and less than laudable approaches to debating the important issues faced by the city. Is this the result that Santa Monica's progressive voters wanted when they went to the polls in November 2020? In my view, it's unlikely that Santa Monica's progressive voters made a conscious choice to undermine police reform by their November 2020 choices. Santa Monica voters in November 2020 chose progressive LA County DA George Gascon by a large majority. I assume that these voters likely did not have any reason to believe they were voting to end police reform, local police reform, when they voted for city council members. Next, the silence of progressives, in my view, has been harmful for local police reform. Do Santa Monica voters, who overwhelmingly and regularly vote for progressive causes and candidates, do these voters care about the disproportionate impacts that Black and Latinx people routinely experience in police encounters? Now, there are 2 to 3 groups in Santa Monica. This one right here, the Committee for Racial Justice, Coalition for Police Reform, and Santa Monicans for Democracy, who have been vigorous supporters of the efforts for police reform and oversight for many years. They've been active participants in commission meetings and in city council meetings. They've advocated directly with council members, with SMPD leadership and others to support the commission's efforts, and generally have worked tirelessly to make a difference. But where are the others? There's numerous organizations in Santa Monica that nominally purport to support a range of progressive issues, but they have not actively weighed in on this issue. And what about the lack of involvement of Santa Monica residents more generally? Why aren't they demanding that city officials get their act together and do the right things concerning civilian oversight and police reform? Now, unfortunately, I don't know the answers. In part, I assume the lack of involvement by large numbers of Santa Monica residents has the same explanation as for other local issues. People are busy with their day-to-day lives, and for most affluent, privileged Santa Monica residents, police reform has not been a priority issue. Still, their lack of involvement creates space for the active forces of resistance to undermine reform and oversight without significant pushback. Third, in this area, I want to talk about racism and privilege. We need to acknowledge that racism in policing is a major underlying reason why police reform is on the political agenda in our country. It's the reason why millions of people protested in the US after George Floyd's murder. And it animated the protests in Santa Monica on May 31, 2020, and the response by the city council when it took steps to address policing in the city, among several other actions directed at addressing systemic racism. Now, the vast majority of residents in Santa Monica are white and affluent, and they are extremely unlikely to have an unpleasant encounter with police. They don't have a persistent worry in their day-to-day lives about having an unpleasant or violent police encounter, or that their children or relatives will have such an encounter. Consequently, they don't have the inherent motivation to address the challenges and problems of policing. But Black and Latinx people living here or visiting Santa Monica can't assume the same comfort level. The data shows, and if you look at my essay, again, linked in the chat, you'll find my supporting references. The data shows that there are stark and persistent disparities in the treatment of Black and Latinx people in the US during police encounters. Those encounters include a range of disparate treatment, from aggression and disrespect to physical violence, serious injury, and sometimes fatalities. And data provided to the advisory committee, the Public Safety Reform Advisory Committee, during the summer of 2020 from the SMPD showed similar disparities by race and ethnicity in SMPD stops, arrests, and citations. Now, the divide between how people experience policing is also a factor in why police reform is difficult in Santa Monica and in the country at large. Privileged insiders have political power and do not perceive police to be a threat to their day-to-day existence or livelihood. They've got little incentive to work to make policing better. All right, my last topic in this part, I've labeled fear, unions, and bureaucratic capture. And here, part one, union aggression. The POA has been a significant impediment to the overall effort at civilian oversight. We need to remind ourselves, I think, that while our police officers as individuals are often dedicated public servants doing their best to perform their duties, the union's goals are different. The goal of the police union is to prioritize the job conditions, wages, benefits, and minimize liability exposure, that is, accountability, of its members. Their goal is not to prioritize the fair, safe, and equitable implementation of the community's public safety priorities. Thus, their efforts to impede the Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission through direct and indirect methods can be explained by their fundamental purpose of self-protection. Fear tactics. The local press places a lot of emphasis on crime. They and others have been creating a climate of fear. And unfortunately, that climate of fear goes along with a suggestion that you do nothing about police reform and oversight and have some knee-jerk response on as opposed to a thoughtful, careful, considered response to issues. Now, Mark Morgenstern wrote an essay that's on our website, and it's linked in the chat, showing how the local crime statistics do not reflect rising crime in the city. And I urge you to read it. Now, people in the city undoubtedly have legitimate concerns about quality of life issues and other issues created by the unhoused population, among other things. But those concerns can't be addressed by ignoring police oversight and having a knee-jerk response to increase police budgets. Some people use the claim of being pro-police to try to position people who want to pursue oversight and reform as not favoring police, and that's simply not true. The people who use these knee-jerk pro-police rhetorics are also the ones claiming incorrectly that crime is up and using that rhetoric to avoid addressing the difficult issues or even solving the issues they claim to exist concerning crime. Final subpoint, bureaucratic capture of policymaking. This is a term I've come up with to reflect the idea that all of these conditions can lead to policy decisions being made by city officials who don't reflect the standards and the values of the residents of Santa Monica. People and groups with outside influence on city officials and city officials willing to ignore the residents and the city council's approved ordinance can work to undermine progress towards meaningful improvement in public safety policy for all of us. Okay, that's it for the first part of the discussion from me, and now we're going to pass it along to our next panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, George Brown, for such thoughtful and wonderful work. It's an amazing amount of work you've done on the history of what's happening here in Santa Monica, and we really all appreciate it. We can benefit from it and learn from it so we can move forward. Really, really appreciate that. I am here to introduce our next panelist. Most of you already know her, but Angela Scott is a member of the Committee for Racial Justice Steering Committee and Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commissioner. She will contribute to her perspective on some of the obstacles experienced in efforts towards reform. She is a mother of three, an activist, vice chair of administration for the Santa Monica League of Women Voters, and a personalization and content manager. She's written and edited for several publications and books, has served on numerous education-related committees, including special education and the Intercultural Equity and Excellence District Advisory Committees for the SMUSD, the Unified School District, as well as serving on the local Committee for Excellence in Public Schools. She holds a master's in business for veterans from USC. Ms. Scott is an intelligent, involved, dedicated, and hardworking member of the Commissioner. Welcome, Angela.
Hi, good welcome. Thank you everyone for having me here in this space. Typically, I'm used to being on the other side as far as leading the Q&A discussion. So it's always a little bit different when you're actually on the panel. But again, thanks everyone. I'm hoping to contribute my spin, I suppose, my experience, not only working with George, whom I treasure dearly as our former chair for the commission, but also kind of give an update on where we've been. I believe I'm going to start off by saying I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the accomplishments that we have done on the commission, although it's been a trial and a challenge to get things across the finish line. We have gotten certain reports across the finish line. So I wanted to start this first round on just talking about those, and then we can do a deeper dive into the challenges, the obstacles, the blockers that are in the way, and how we can hopefully work collectively to, again, move things across the finish line. I want to first say that this upcoming Tuesday, no, the following Tuesday, I'm sorry, November 15th, the commission will come before City Council to give our first report, and this will be on regarding the May 31st after action report, as well as the input that we received from our internal, our IG who works with us. And at the same time, if you're writing all these dates down, November 30th, please mark this in your calendar as well. We are going to start again the special joint Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission meetings, the standing ones that are between the community engagement, the protest and crowd management, as well as reimagining policing. I will say this regarding the community engagement. We are starting a listening session, and we're going to kick it off with having the Coalition for Police Reform start to give their input. This whole listening session that we're going to do for these next several months is centered around community and healing. So I would love to have everyone who's on here also plan to attend all of those upcoming joint meetings that we have. Now, with respect to what we have gotten across the finish line, I will start by saying that there was a complaints process issue that we took a deeper dive in. And when I say we, meaning the Accountability System Standing Committee led that. It started on November 18th, 2021, when we started receiving, we did like interviews with the police department and all of the stakeholders within that to kind of gauge on what was and what needed to be addressed with respect to the current, what they were doing at that time, complaint policy. What we found were several things that were lacking. Number one, the complaints were not processed to allow for proper oversight due to too much discretion being placed on the supervisor on duty. Specifically, the policy at that time, if a supervisor determined that a complaint did not contain a potential policy violation, then the supervisor might have dismissed the complaint without making a proper record of that complaint being made. Again, we also found issues where there was it lacked a proper system for tracking and taking complaints, as well as formalizing them at the end. So with that summary, because I'm going to try to give you just a high level view, all of this, let me drop into the chat. If you go to our website, you can go on specific dates. For example, I'm speaking on the complaints policy. So if you look on the date for that, which would be, let me go back to the date and pull it up for you. I'll give it to you in a second. But if you look on there, you'll be able to download that entire policy. So all of the things, if you go through our site, I know some of you are really good about looking at everything on there, but if you go specifically to certain sites, for example, this one that I'm speaking of is October 29th. So if you go on there, you're going to find the Inspector General's interim report on the status, and then you'll also see the after action report. And then if you go a little further down, you'll see what we have for the complaint policy and all of that. So that's simply by just going to our site and trying, scrolling through everything, and you'll be able to see specific reports that you're able to download in PDF form. So I'm sorry, so going back to what we found as a summary of that report, it included 9 recommendations for reforming the complaints process. Number one was like disallowing immediate supervisor adjudication, all complaints to be submitted to the internal affairs department versus the supervisor. Again, when you look at the stakeholders of who should and shouldn't be involved in that complaint process, it really needs to be within that internal affairs department. We were also looking at disallowing a supervisor from using counseling in place of referring a complaint to the internal affairs. Sometimes you would find that a supervisor would say, oh, well, let me go have a chat with them. And then there goes your complaint. Once they have that, that was their way of finding a solution, but that wasn't truly a solution. So I will say, with respect to what we had recommended, we then had our Inspector General do an audit of our recommendations, and they also confirmed all that we had stated, and their audit, which if you were in that meeting on October 27th, our Inspector General, George Janako, went over what his findings were. And again, that's downloadable as well. But you can see on there that he did also talk about the complaint policy. He talked about the tracking system with the own recommendations. Oddly enough, and this is what I want everyone to hone in on, they only looked at 10 cases within 5 years, stating that there was only 10 cases found. If you think about that, wouldn't it be like there should have been like at least 10 complaints on May 31st? So again, where is that hole with where these complaints are going, right? These are the things that we want you as community to look at when we talk about what is happening, where is the control, where is the reports going, what happens when someone files a complaint. So again, these are recommendations that SMPD now has, and they are starting to address that. I think what also needs to be brought up in that respect is the fact that during the time that we kicked off this formal investigation, which was last November when we had our interviews, the organization structure, meaning the leadership structure of SMPD, also changed, right? We now have our permanent chief, which is Ramon Batista. And at that time, we had Chief Seabrooks, who was an interim following Chief Reynaud, right? So there was a lot of changing of hands, changing of leadership. So these are the things to be mindful of when we talk about what is happening, who's controlling at these different levels. Another report that we also did was we reviewed the draft of approving the military equipment, which is AB 481. And this AB 481 came out of our governor's office regarding having each city really know exactly what the militarized weapons are within each of your cities that you're in. And so our commission also took a look at that, and we had our own recommendations and findings with respect to, we specifically looked at, one of the questions was the Bearcat, right? We all see the Bearcat, and we initially thought that this is a militarized automobile, and why do we need it here in the city? Which after further findings, we discovered that it actually is a form of safety in that it's equipped to hold IV bags. It also carries all of the things that paramedics would need. So these are the things that you find when you do a deeper dive and you talk to SMPD regarding what is and isn't in their vehicles. And at the same time, we did have our Inspector General also look at comparable vehicles that are used in other cities, as well as comparable weapons. So we did take a deeper dive, and that's how we came up with that report, which again, you can download it on the website. And then, you know, like I said, I did mention our current roadmap of where we are now with these upcoming meetings. And I'm just gonna stop there for right now. We did have another report on body camera usage, which you can download again. And we gave, again, our recommendations and our, you know, what our findings were coming out of May 31st, where I think we all knew that only 50% of the body cameras were turned on that day. So that was one of our flags that we looked at, and we took a deeper dive in what exactly is happening with the body cameras. But again, like I said, I just wanted to give a high level overview of the things that we did accomplish, although that's not without having trials and challenges getting these things across the finish line. And I'll yield back my time.
Thank you, Angela. I'm Joanne Berlin, and I'm going to have the distinct pleasure of introducing Dr. Karen Gunn, who is our third panel member. And after she speaks, we will circle back and have kind of a round two with the panelists being able to interact with each other as well. And then we'll have a Q&A. So as you've been told before, we will ask you to put your questions as they come up to you in the chat. And Robbie and Janet will be in charge of that segment. I also want to say before I introduce Dr. Gunn that if you are not on our email list and want to know what workshops we have coming up, we have them every month, put your email, your name and your email in the chat and say you want to be on the list. Thanks. So I think most of you on this call probably are familiar with Karen Gunn, but if not, I will say that she is a highly regarded trainer, facilitator, motivational speaker, and community volunteer. Some of you may have worked with her when she was chairing the Santa Monica Bay Human Relations Council, or before that, when she was chair of the Santa Monica Social Services Commission. But she has extensive experience in the area of education, having chaired the psychology department of Santa Monica College. And she now has her own organizational and management development professional services group that offers a lot of executive coaching, consultation, training to private, nonprofit, and public sector organizations. Anyway, she is an expert and has expertise as a consultant focusing on DEI initiatives, interpersonal communication, community engagement and development, team building, cultural competencies, leadership skills, and strategic planning. All of that being said, we at CRJ are always pleased to have her with us, to be able to receive the warmth of her wisdom and her indomitable spirit. Welcome, Dr. Karen S. Gunn.
Thank you, Joanne. I'm glad to be here. Thanks to CRJ and all of your leaders who keep calling me back, and I keep coming back. So I'm kind of like a bad penny. So Joanne has explained sort of what my background is, and everyone, I hope, will appreciate that that's the lens for my remarks. And in many ways, they dovetail with important information that Angela shared, Angela Scott, and what our brother George opened up with in terms of the challenges for the Oversight and Reform Commission. I want to just perhaps talk about things in a sort of big picture, but that also have relevance for the primary focus of this evening. And that's kind of the overarching considerations in this town. So the title of this session of Who's Running This Town is a burning, provocative question. And I've oftentimes thought about this in prepping for it, that this town should be our town. And our town should be one that embraces and reflects everyone's perspective. And that's particularly important in terms of voices that have not been centered in policymaking and representation. And I think there's 6 huge areas, and I'm only going to try to talk about maybe 3 or 4 of them that are overarching considerations. One is power and persuasion in this town. And there are people and there are organizations, there are entities that wield power and persuasion quite effectively, and sometimes with results that some communities that are here in Santa Monica are not happy with. Privilege has been mentioned, and I think it is a powerful factor. The privilege of some people that others actually don't have. We need to remind ourselves every day, in my view, that this town of 8 square miles and 92.5 thousand people is also a town where the median income is $96,000 a year, where the median price of a home is $1.5 million. It is a community that is 64% white. Statisticians that look at diversity in LA County will say that Santa Monica is remarkable for its lack of diversity. And our economic and our ethnic disparities are indicators of that fact. And it is also what is at play in terms of the power of money, of status, and that then becomes influential. We are a city that I've always struggled with because we have a persona of progressiveness. And I want to emphasize persona. That kind of is sort of the superficial representation of something that actually should be authentic and fully represented in what the city does and the decisions that they make, the policies and decision-making process, and who is included. Before I became a resident of Santa Monica and I simply worked here, I quickly heard that, it was often a place referred to as the Republic of Santa Monica. And that was because of some of the earlier efforts to protect renters and other things like that. And people wore that progressive persona on their sleeve, and they believe in it. But the challenge for us, and particularly for those who are interested in social justice, economic justice, racial justice, will say we're not quite there. The persona has not translated into full-blown reality. And again, we have people who can afford the cost of a single dwelling home with a nice lot, where they can raise their flag of progressiveness with a couple of Teslas and maybe a Prius in the driveway for soccer days, and not really make it happen. There can be a comfort that folks feel, a comfort zone that they sit in, that actually protects them from the kinds of considerations that we're talking about this evening, where one does not have to have the conversation, as they call it, with their children about what to do when they're stopped by the police, because there are really no worries. We have to think about the considerations in our town of who's represented in positions of power and in entities that make a difference, that contribute to public policy development, that make decisions about the services that should be offered and how the city sets itself up. And we certainly have to think about the strategies for advocacy and continue to co-create effective pathways to influence, to be able to counter the impact of status and power and privilege in a way that is strategic. So I think there are a lot of factors today at play that fuel discontent. And I should say that there are also probably some people who are quite content. And then there's the rest of us who ain't feeling it. And we need to think about that. There's toxicity in our discourse and in our public square. There are venomous verbiage and talk between us. There's divisiveness that's present. There's distrust that people have about the practices and policies of our city and the entities that affect our lives on a daily basis, which means that many of us are stressed, worried, and traumatized. And one of the factors that then comes into play as a consequence of what I've just said is that people are, to some extent, experiencing public fatigue. It's almost sort of, I talk to people who are not sure they want to pick up tomorrow's edition of the local news because they just don't know what they're going to see, what they're going to hear, whether they can trust the veracity, the credibility, the truthiness of what they read. There's one local entity that has been in our news recently at a national level because of stories and statements that they have put out historically, and even more recently, following the attack on Mr. Paul Pelosi. It led our beloved Elon Musk to quote that source and then pull back that information. So that also means that social media plays a role. Not only its content, which we should always question. I firmly believe we need to be media literate, and I would love to see more opportunities to talk about what that means. And it's about how much we consume and what we consume. And we also kind of sit in our comfort zone, which means that what we consume oftentimes fits with what we believe, which means we don't hear and think about what others are thinking that have a different perspective. We need to worry about, think about, and understand that disinformation is at play in our community, just as it is in the national scenario. And when I talk about disinformation, I want to make sure I'm clear and what everyone needs to think about. Disinformation is an intentional effort to mislead. It is a thoughtful, motivated effort to put out bogus information that isn't backed up. And so we have siloed perspectives. What I would suggest is that in order for us to co-create safer spaces and more effective engagement in the public square with those folks who make decisions, we need to hopefully have shared values. And we may have to work on what that means. Where is the common ground that builds bridges between different opinions? There needs to be an investment in a social contract. That means that I only do as well as you do, and that empathy is important. We need to center the voices that have been excluded, and we can find many examples of where that is in fact the case. There needs to be what I would call genuine inclusion in city processes, not shiny objects, not things that are put forth as a suggestion. Well, we've checked this box. We've covered this group. We've included a representative here. However, as one of the common things about inclusion that is oftentimes said in a short-circuited perspective is inclusion is not simply being in the room at the dance, it's being asked to dance. We need transparency. My brother Nat Travis, who has recently talked about truth, transparency, and trust, so I'm stealing his stuff, but we all know that transparency is something that's on the lips of many of us. We don't have, where we should have, full transparency of policy and decision-making at the municipal level with the commissions and other entities that make differences, whether they're unions, whether they are advocate groups for renters, for all across the board. We can certainly invest more in assuring a greater degree of transparency. And we need collective and strategic action. We need to be able to collaborate. Again, I like this phrase of co-creating. So as I end my remarks, I would simply suggest that some important considerations for achieving social and racial and economic justice in our town, this town, yours and mine, is that we need those effective pathways to persuasion and advocacy. And I want to underline effective, because if we go through the show, but nothing goes down that makes the change that we're asking for, and there is a distinct urgency for change, we are falling short of what I believe is the mission of the Committee for Racial Justice, the Human Relations Commission, the League of Women Voters, many other organizations. There needs to be opportunities, I believe, for community dialogue and education across the board on a regular basis, not one-shot deals. We need to figure out how to address disinformation that's been in play during this election season, directed at candidates, disinformation. So we build robust strategies for accountability and oversight. And we need to continue to invest in cultivating community leadership, intergenerational, across all ethnic groups and religious groups. We need leaders of all types. Those of us of one generation need to be in the mix just as much as those of younger generations. So what I would like to think about is one of the other personas of Santa Monica, as I end my comments, is that this is a place where we have healed the Bay, a place with lofty goals to assure the health of our coastline, of our water, of our marine life. And actually, if you check the postings, the quality of our water stinks. We are still oftentimes cautioned about going into the water underneath the Santa Monica Pier because it ain't too cool if you swallow it. So I'd like to suggest that we need to heal the Bay the social justice way. Thank you.
I think now you've started the ball. Thank you, Dr. Karen Gunn, for adding comments about well, where we could go from here, because we're interested in knowing that from all the panelists, where we could go from here. And I think that, I don't know if Robbie, what you wanted to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, is this a time where we're going to give the panelists a chance to comment on each other before we go
Right.
on Q&A?
Yeah.
So at this time, panelists, you can, if you have comments for your special people, I wanted to say sitting beside you, I forgot, I'm sorry, we're not in person. Just you know, put your comments, you can go ahead and do your comments, and then we will go right into Q&A.
I think George has a little presentation to start that.
Oh, great. Okay, George.
Well, I would call it less formal than a presentation. But Karen's comments on what we should be doing certainly resonate with me. I think fighting mis and disinformation is important. Cultivating new leaders is important. I don't have any brilliant ideas, but my general thoughts are that we need to keep trying. We can't, we can't give up and walk away. I think generally we need to get more people active and interested. And a couple ways to do that would be for people that are already active and interested, to meet with groups and individuals that are outside of our, our core specialty areas. So, other organizations that have other missions that should be consistent with the things we're interested in. I think helping to address key public safety concerns that the residents and businesses have that might not be directly reform related might be a good way to get people more active and involved. So we could host community forums on the topics that are circulating. And people have fear of crime. Let's have some meetings about what that's all about and what the statistics are and what's happening. I think promoting public education on key issues of reform and oversight, I think, is another way to get people active and involved. So generally, I think that groups like CRJ and Coalition for Police Reform and others need to keep the pressure on, continue participating in the commission meetings and pushing for setting the agenda. And to try to expand the number of people who are engaged in this effort. And, just think of exponential networking. If everybody can get 2 more people involved, then eventually you have a lot more people. So I'll stop there. And then, Angela, I appreciated your comments that the commission has done some things. I think my framing is more that it's not achieving the goals set out in the ordinance. And those goals are largely frustrated. But meanwhile, we have people soldiering on, trying to get the work done and having some accomplishments. And, we should applaud you all for that and keep up the good fight.
Yeah,
So
I would add, thank you, George, is that it's my take on this, because I really do believe there is this fierce urgency of now, is that the groups that want to address these profound issues and challenges that we have in this community can always benefit, and then that means our town would benefit from exploring new ways to bring people on board and new ways to engage across the community that have not been explored. And, that may be novel ideas, creative approaches, things that, while this kind of presentation is invaluable, it is an opportunity for us to share and to talk and for people to ask questions. We need to bounce from this to some other ways as well, to be able to hear from folks, to gather perspectives, to curry interest, and to encourage involvement. So the folks can walk away from experiences like this and decide what they can do as individuals to take this message, to carry this message, to keep at the forefront some of the concerns that we've raised this evening. So I think all of those things are important.
Yeah,
Angela, where are you at?
I'll jump in. I absolutely agree. I guess first, first of all, Karen, that was a mic drop with Heal the Bay the social justice way. I just have to say, bam, she said that and walked away. That is completely true of what we're doing. And if you're thinking towards Tuesday, let's make democracy work, as we say in the league. Just have to throw that out there as well. But really just driving back to the community conversation, the dialogue. I think if you think about it, and George, you'll recall, this was one of the fundamental vision statements that we had, and Robbie too, when we were on the committee prior to the commission being formed, was creating that community engagement, creating these conversations. And Karen, you helped through the Black Agenda to lead one of the first conversations. And I think that is something that we need to go back and get to it, because the work is by far not done at all. We need to continue these discussions. Now, with respect to what that looks like, I think there's a lot of nuances to that. I think first and foremost, like I mentioned, through the community engagement ad hoc committee of the Public Safety Reform and Oversight Commission, it is just that, an ad hoc, meaning it is an open forum available to commissioners as well as residents. So yes, all of y'all that are on here, you have the opportunity to join that ad hoc committee, participate in the dialogue, help drive what that vision is all about. And I saw Commissioner, my co-chair, Commissioner Cruz, is on here as well. I saw him. So I implore you all to please consider joining the community engagement ad hoc committee and help us drive what community engagement is all about, what healing is all about within the community, what restorative justice is all about. Because I think only through all of our diverse voices are we going to land on what reimagining will do and how it works. With respect to promoting and education and what that all looks like, I have so many thoughts, especially looking at both of you who are professors, and I go right into Santa Monica College. I think that's an opportune way that we could leverage the Public Policy Institute with, Richard Talvitaran Jeswine and Sherry Davis, and see how we can look at perhaps driving some of the students in there because they have an externship. So I say, let's open it up as a way for them to somehow participate in the public safety reform. And again, that's something that I would take back, and I've had some discussion with the commission about, but I think that's something that's really feasible, actionable, and measurable on all three tiers when you think about it in that way. And then also even with Rand Corporation, I know we do have an opportunity to actually have an internship. It's in our budget to do so. But again, when we talk about what that younger voice in Santa Monica is all about, it comes from that. Now, I know we do have our 2 young adult position as commissioners, but I don't think that's the end all be all. I think that we can always continue to drive more voices, drive more engagement. I think we have an obligation to do so as a city and as a community. So again, I think there's so many opportunities to really try to work through all of the obstacles that we're seeing right now, especially from the vein of community involvement. And all of it does go back to knowing when these meetings take place. We try to do it virtually so that allows everyone, especially those that are immunocompromised like myself. I can't always be there in public, but I can virtually. And that's the whole thing behind driving that, is that everyone can come in, just as they do here. You can come into all of our meetings that we have as well through public safety. and I'll just stop there, but those are just my
Yeah,
ideas.
but I wanted to add one idea, and that is that one of the side effects of the pandemic was that we learned to organize and communicate online and using Zoom. And I think that technology has opened up a world of possibilities that haven't been fully explored yet. And so, for example, no need to wait for the Oversight Commission to hold a meeting and have community engagement, or to get an expert on a topic relating to policing to speak to a group of Santa Monica residents. And so, time and resources permitting, I think folks should consider doing some organizing and having some interest meetings and conferences, taking advantage of what's possible via Zoom.
Let me add one thing too, that, the fact that the commission is going to have the listening opportunities. I think it is so important for us to value the power of listening. It is a method of validation. It is an opportunity to hear. And there's a reason why we have two of these and only one of those, is because we should use these twice as much. Everyone needs to be heard. When we talk about in the community, you need to recognize. That recognition occurs when people are in the room, when their stories and their experiences are validated and valued. And there's certainly no area more important for that than in police reform. The officers who are there to do the best they can need to be able to understand the experiences of the people in the community that they're entrusted to serve. So there has to be a two-way street. And I cannot emphasize that more in terms of basic communication. I'd really be interested. I think we're almost at about 7:30 or so. What might be any questions that people have? I hope I'm okay doing that.
You're right on time, Karen. You're right on time. We were just thinking of that. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first question. Janet and I will tag team here, usually Angela and I, but now it's because she's the esteemed panelist, we are going to tag team. So this one is from Elizabeth Lear. She wants to know, were there any lawsuits and or payouts regarding the events that took place in Santa Monica on May 31st, 2020?
I'm not aware of the details, but I'm vaguely aware that there's a pending lawsuit, at least one. I'm not aware of any payouts either. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, same. I'm not aware of any payouts, but I believe there is at least one pending lawsuit as of May 31st.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have the next question, I think. This is from Craig Ali, and it looks like it's for George. It doesn't say that, but here's the question. In your research, is there something within the city charter that holds, or maybe it's not, maybe it could be for anybody, that is there something within the city charter that holds not just employees, such as police, but elected officials who show favoritism in spite of the abuses suffered by the citizenry?
Well, that's a complex question. I think it's asking about, rules and regulations governing ethics and conflicts of interest. And Santa Monica has robust rules around that. And the challenge is getting someone to act on them. And with respect to, some of the issues we've been talking about, some of this influence comes from privilege and insider status, and may not either directly violate a specific rule, And even if it does, may be of the type that's so routine that it's ignored. So on the one, so it's always the case that there are often formal rules and procedures, and then there's informal things that happen, and sometimes rules are enforced, and other times they're less so.
Anybody want to respond more, or you agree with George? Okay, great. Robbie?
Okay, the next question is from Joanne Berlin. She says, if money plays a role in who is running this town, what is the significance of the police union spending around $100,000 on our current local election? It's up in the air. Who's gonna catch it?
Well, you know, money talks, and there's a completed part of this, and other things walk. But you know, the fact of the matter is there's influence potential, because there's money to put towards advertising for all those things that have filled our mailboxes for the last 3 weeks. There is the opportunity to frame the situation in a way that suits the interest of any organization, whether it be the union, and there are multiple unions here that are active. So when you're able to put some dollars into the process, and others who have equally important messages to convey, but don't have the money to put them out there, it may not be quite a zero-sum game, but it's close. Some folks are going to make a difference. George looks like he wants to add.
I just can't help myself. The police union has long had undue political influence in Santa Monica. I mean, you could talk to Nat Travis, who's, you know, local historian, who can fill in chapter and verse. I think that's dangerous. And I think it happens all over the country, and I think it's dangerous. If you think about it, we, in a democracy, we allocate the power to use violence against people to the police department. And we do that through constitution and laws and rules. And that's an important power. And to the extent that there's no oversight, or that these folks with this extraordinary power that's been delegated to them have undue political influence, where they favor a portion of the community and not everyone, it starts to become a slippery slope, and has all sorts of hazards that are, ultimately undermine our entire democratic system, starting with local effects. So, it's the outsiders who feel it first. So Black and Latinx people and other marginalized groups have always experienced the brunt of policing and have always been outsiders. But as that slippery slope continues, and you have police unions aligned with political factions inside the city, it starts to undermine the democratic processes for everybody. So I'll get off my high horse there and just say, I think it's dangerous, and it ought to be called out consistently. But unfortunately, people who are politicians have to live in fear of this phenomenon, because the union has been successful more often than not.
And I'll interject ever so cautiously. What I will say to that effect, again, like you said, it's dangerous, and I think this is why it's so important that you stay abreast of what is and isn't true, of what is news and what is not true, untrue, not factual news. Because if you don't, you will be led down that rabbit hole into a dark place of not knowing that your perception of someone based on what you've heard is in fact not true. So I would just be it's a very cautionary tale. I just say, please stay abreast of everything, because you always have to see who's driving the narrative and the reason behind their drive of that narrative.
Yeah, I would agree too, Angela, to piggyback on what you're saying is, the first thing is, don't believe everything that you might read or see on social media the first time you look at it. Media literacy is an invaluable asset for community invested people to invest in being able to do. So it is about questioning. There are even programs now, most of them kind of built on academic research about all the steps one can go through if you see a story in the Santa Monica Daily Press or the Observer or other outlets, to stop and check. We were joking before this started, Google it. What you need to Google are the resources that are mentioned, to see where they are, who funds them, because things can look like they're coming from credible sources, and they are a combination of not factual, mostly bogus, misrepresented kinds of things. So it really is important for us to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves in terms of what's out there and what we believe. The notion is that lies travel much faster than truth. And we need to be aware of that.
And I'm also going to do a shameless plug right now with respect to these last candidate forums. You can check on our YouTube channel for the league, and we have the forums that we had with CRJ on, the city council. So that's listed on there, as well as school board. So again, that is also an opportunity to hear right out of the candidate's mouth what they stand for and the issues that they speak for. So that's another way, to wage that against all your research. Please do your research before you vote. Vote with literacy. The league also has information on, and we're nonpartisan, so we're going to be right in the middle and give you both sides and let you decide. But please research, please, before you vote, because your vote matters, and we want it to matter the right way.
Great, thank you. Here's a question from Kevin. The POA and some of our elected leaders and candidates, allied candidates, have misframed reform as meaning less policing. Anathema to those fearful of crime. How can we work together to reframe reform as meaning better policing, not necessarily less?
Yeah, that's a great question. To skip to the answer, I do think that hosting sessions available to the broader community on topics that have been widely debated and discussed in the community, like issues of crime from unhoused people or other concerns, and just confronting it directly is useful. But what's happening is that the resistance is about having any process at all, and then using kind of spin and misinformation to suggest that people who want reform automatically want things to be more dangerous, or things that don't make any sense, or we want less policing. And I've always said that we actually don't know whether my personal views on something is any different from someone who's completely against the commission, because we can't even get to that part of the discussion. And so I think we have to work harder to get to those parts of the discussion, because I do think that there's probably less distance between people on a lot of issues than it may appear from the surface. But we are disadvantaged by people who are in control of the spin, who try to claim that either you're for safety or against safety, right? Either you want more police or less police. Those are simplistic and superficial. and really completely miss the opportunity to make public safety better for all of us.
Yeah, I would even go so far as to say that in many cases, there's a value for some in misrepresenting police reform, and that it becomes quite unfortunate when people raise the question of and want to characterize the Reformation movement as being people who want to take money out of the police budget, who want to have police disappear. And on a one-to-one basis, one could actually question why someone is raising that consideration, rather than forcing the reformers to have to explain their already clearly stated intentions to make positive change. So you put the responsibility on folks sitting on a commission to explain what they're not, instead of asking people who are raising these questions, where is this coming from? Why are you questioning the intentions, the motivations, and the will of people who are here to try to make positive change, to heal the Bay in the social justice way? That's where we, flip the script. So folks are not having to explain the things that, at least to some of us here on the screen, make perfect sense. The question is, why are you questioning it?
Right. And and honestly, just to piggyback on all of that, it's, when we set out to do the good work, to get in the good trouble, it was never we against them. George, Robbie, we were in this guardian versus warrior mentality. It was never us against them. It was always, let's go about this collectively. Let's coalition build collectively and talk about what reimagining is all about. Because at the end of the day, all of these decisions, we're not going to be here decades from now when they all get implemented. I'm doing it for my kids and their kids and so on and so on. So we have to really take a forward-facing approach to change and not be afraid of change. That's the worst thing you can do, is be afraid of change. That's like being afraid of switching to a CD or DVR from a VHS tape. It's like when you first got it, you're like, what is this? That's like my grandma saying, oh, I'm never going to get an airplane because I don't trust it. It's just like, where would we be without understanding and embracing change, right? It's like we have to. And yes, change can be done incremental. There's never been an argument about that, but we got to get there. We got to get the discussion going and then go from there. So yes, when you're on a commission like me with those who they're either for reform or they're unapologetically against, we've got to find a place to meet in the middle and have these conversations and collectively work. And again, that has been, like George mentioned, and Karen, some of the obstacles in taking things across the finish line is embracing the new. Embrace it. And that's where we are.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions, but I'm gonna flip the script here. One, I'd like to make a comment, my dear Angela. When we first started the committee to form the commission, it was supposed to be community. It's community oversight. We never asked for the POA to be on the committee. That was kind of forced upon us. And, again, we made concession. We let it happen. And I think that was the beginning of what we see now. It was horrible. To have that, we were told they were coming in peace, but I'm still looking for it. So anyway, there is another question, and then after, I don't know, I have a question as well, which fits along with this one, but I'll go ahead and ask Samantha Moto's question. What do you think the influence of the SMPOA on this upcoming election will have on the PSROC?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that the POA has been trying to kill the commission from the beginning. I've said it repeatedly. I've written it down, told everybody who will listen. And all you have to do is read the public record. So they'll keep trying. I think they're shooting themselves in the foot because they have an opportunity to be a leader. They can be the heel of the bay of policing. It wouldn't even be that hard. And yet, out of some, unstated fear of the unknown, they won't even take the smallest step of talking to people about policing. That's all. That's the commission is designed not to have a great deal of power. It has the power to set agenda and ask for information and talk about stuff. Well, why are you afraid of that? So I don't know how it's going to impact the election, but I know that however it comes out, be on the lookout for this group to continue to try to undermine the commission.
I think there is a question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so my question fits with this. I don't know, George or Angela or Karen, if you guys have heard. Los Angeles was talking about something very similar, and they were talking about how to relieve the pressure off council at election time from POA, like taking something out of their, the rules of engagement charter. I don't know, putting something on the ballot that will not let them be so effective when coming after council members to support them or giving money to the campaign. So do you know anything about that, George? I was hearing about it. I didn't get everything. I have to watch Spectrum News again, but it seemed like something that Santa Monica might want to take a look at.
I'd be interested in learning more about that.
Okay.
I don't know anything about it, but if you find out, please send it to me.
Absolutely.
So I have a question here from Joanne that kind of relates to this because it's about fear and it's about the election. So there is a lot of chatter about how dangerous Santa Monica is. It's come out in some of the local newspapers and others are trying to push it. It sort of goes along with some folks who are saying we need more policing and that means less reform. I mean, it all kind of goes in the same story, somebody that is creating a story, and this kind of fits into it. And maybe it is a real concern, but what do you all think about that? Do you think we need to be as afraid of how dangerous Santa Monica is, as some people are saying? This concern about crime seems to come up at election time. I mean, if you watch it on cycles, it comes up every election time. If you could comment.
You know what? Yeah, I'm sure George and Angela may have something to say about this, but what's interesting, if I recall correctly, and again, you might want to check it, Google it, but the Santa Monica Daily Press put out something, and I believe it was charting the top 3 priorities of the individuals running for our city council. And I think it asked what the 3 top priorities were, and almost without exception, the unhoused population and crime were at least 2 of the top 3 for every candidate, if I remember correctly. And indeed, one of their options was social justice. And if I recall the article again accurately, there was only one candidate that had social justice as one of their top 3. So that should tell you something. And the other thing, and George, you could certainly add to this, and Angela, there is the notion in social sciences about crime statistics and things like that, that the fear of crime is greater than the actual statistical support for the types of crime that's occurring in a community. So our social media, our television, our journalists, are always, if it bleeds, it leads. that statement is as valuable today as it was 20 years ago when it came up. And it becomes the sort of this favored subject matter for upon which you can run for public office. And people don't ask the question, what are the statistics? So that's my read about that. George and Angela may have a take on it as well.
Well, yeah, I do agree that it's a repeated cycle. And I mean, one reaction, of course, is that there has been no progress on police reform and oversight. So it has not had any, so whatever's happening on that hasn't affected whatever's happening on crime. And the police have had unfettered ability to do their job. And so if crime is up, they should be explaining why they haven't been able to do their job. But I don't want to make that argument. I think that perhaps a way at this is to confront it directly. And if people in Santa Monica have fear of things, then why not organize? This is one of the things the commission should be doing. Why not organize some conversations around that fear? Why not get information, have people come in and talk about it, talk about what's the nature of it? What is it? And in a way that's not defensive or accusatory, but people really do have fears of things that they don't know much about, because all they get is the headline in the local newspaper that says you should be afraid because some bad stuff happened yesterday. So anyway, so my thought is that that perhaps confronting it directly and getting some transparency, getting data and having a dialogue and asking the police, what are they going to do about it? What ideas do people have about whatever it is that's causing the underlying fear? I think would be a worthwhile exercise.
No, you know, and I wholeheartedly agree, George. And Louise should be dropping 2 links for everyone right now on Santa Monica Police Department. They have part 1 and part 2 crimes, and it shows the statistics right now between 2020 and 2022. But to your point regarding that conversation, that is also part of what we're doing in community engagement. The whole thing is listening, right? It's going back to, we're going to quote unquote take a tour and listen to all of the organizations, all of the neighborhood associations, every stakeholder entity who has a group that are doing any form of advocacy. That is our whole goal, is to listen and hear what they have to say about their experiences with SMPD, as well as their lived experiences with crime and everything else around that. We want to know exactly how everyone is feeling. And that's how, like you said, and maybe not wait until we have ours, like on November 31st, but if there's another group that wants to do the same thing, by all means, go at it. But the point is, let's have these conversations. Let's have these listening, because that's what we're doing. We're listening because we're still trying to get an understanding of what each organization, what neighborhood association is dealing with, because we know that no neighborhood association is a monolith. You know, whether you're in Sunset Park, Ocean Park, Mid-City, we know that each neighborhood association deals with crime differently, right? They see something different as opposed to like Pico. You know, it's just, it depends on where you are. What you see is more rampant, and we need to get that understanding. And those are the things that, as we're listening, the police department should be on there listening with us. Again, I know they have their neighborhood resource officers, but they don't talk to everybody in the neighborhood. They're there, but that doesn't mean you go and have coffee and a donut with them. Some people, again, do not get outside their house. Some people, just based on past experiences, are not that comfy and cozy going to meet with Sergeant Valentino. You know what I mean? Hope that's not someone. But anyways, like I said, you know, so it is, like you said, we have to drive these conversations. But do look at those statistics on there. That kind of gives an overview. And I know just even in our recent meeting that we had with the POA in September, they, of course, also debunked this theory of increased crime. Now, there are certain, like you see part 1 and part 2, there are certain parts of crime that I'm like, I go to Ralph's and I see things every day at Ralph's. I'm like, woo, it's kind of lit in here. Let me change the time that I'm going to Ralph's. But you just, again, it's like, this is the time we're in. We're still, oh, by the way, in a global pandemic, and we have economic downfall happening. There's a lot of variables that are weighing into what crime looks like in Santa Monica, right? And need I even go into what school safety, because that's a whole other thing, but it's all of that that's weighing in on what's happening.
Okay, guys, it's down to the wire, but I do have just one more question from Craig and Claudia. And it's been sitting here for a minute, so pardon me for that. How do you fit the terms abolition and or defend the police with your work?
Was that to me?
I imagine it would be.
Let's be clear. As our VP would say, let's be clear. I don't know that I'm defending. I know that I am a civilian. I'm a veteran, but I am a civilian on an oversight commission that is here to audit and oversee the policies and procedures. So I don't know that I sit under defending, but more
Defund.
so
I'm sorry, I
managing.
said defend. I wrote it wrong. It's
Oh, you're fine. You're
I
fine.
assume that.
okay.
I assume that. Let me do
But-
a quick comment on this.
Okay.
So the way I've been thinking about this issue of abolition versus defund versus fix is, in my mind, when I understand the abolitionist arguments, it's more of a long-term goal. And as I kind of think about the politics of it, I don't see a pathway to it within, say, 20 years. And so for me, I really want to make people's lives better sooner. And that's why I really want to work on, are there things that we can do that improve public safety for everyone? And I think it's still, the problems are intractable and the opposition is, terrible oftentimes, but I just don't think we can give up on that in favor of a solution that's decades out where there's no pathway. So that's my current thinking on that. And with respect to defund arguments, I think that unfortunately, the phrase doesn't mean anything out of context. And so we have these superficial debates about, are you for defunding police or adding more police? Well, you can't answer the question outside of a specific jurisdiction with specific issues, and there's a lot of complexity to it. And so I think the answer is probably always, well, maybe, but until you get the facts, until you have an oversight commission, we can say, come in and tell me all the information about how the police department works. You don't know if you need more money or less money. If you're going to do training, anti-bias training, or if you're going to do more officers riding bicycles, or, all sorts of things, sometimes that might take more money. So I think it's a complicated issue, and unfortunately, it gets dealt with superficially in the press and in politics.
Okay, I think we're at closing time, near closing time, right, Robbie? Yeah, and
Yeah.
so we want to thank our panelists, and we want to thank all the people who have come to be with us this evening. We really appreciate all of you listening. We talked a lot about listening tonight, and not all of you did. I really appreciate that. I appreciate the questions, and obviously this is not the end, and I hope that you will follow up and attend some of these community meetings and other things that you can do and follow up with each one of us. So would you like to add anything, Robbie?
Wow, I'd like to add a lot, but I'll just say thank you panelists for coming. Thank you guys for always coming, always being present, and staying woke and staying just true, staying, bringing us the truth all the time. I really appreciate that. A lot of these things CPR had already put in process. And so it really shouldn't be so hard for, either party, council or POA or whoever, police department, to implement these things we're talking about, because we've been talking about them for years. And, when we talk about community engagement, I think it was 2017. I don't know if anybody from CPR is on here, but we had given the proposal to do a community event where police would go on go and learn about the African American Latino experience and community, but experience even more by having roundtables with our esteemed professors from SMC facilitating those roundtables, and where the community could act out and don't have to feel so intimidated or threatened or uncomfortable around officers, and likewise, but it would be like a role playing atmosphere, and just a good conversation, not shouting and screaming at each other. But that was never really accepted. So I don't know if we're going to get the POA or whoever to work with us. Definitely it takes both parties, and you can't just point the finger, and you can't always just say I'm perfect, because nothing is perfect on this earth. So that's all I got to say about it.
Right, you want to lead the closing?
Can I
guess
jump in real
so.
quick?
Might as well.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Can I jump in real quick?
Mm.
I just ask everyone, please, please, please come to our commissioner meetings. I need your help like no one else does. So I implore you, please, please. Thank you for all those who are supporting me in so many different ways, but please show up, talk, tell your story, because that's the only way that all of your voices will be heard and will be acknowledged. So please come to the commissioner meetings. Please start to get more involved, especially in the community engagement. It's an ad hoc committee. So that means y'all on here, the residents, can join that committee and actually start to help drive it.
I just got a question if they're online or in person, Angela.
They're online right now. We'll let you know when they're in person again. We've only had one in-person meeting so far, and that was at Virginia Avenue Park in September, but they are still online as of right now.
Okay. We usually close out. Thank you, everybody, for coming, but don't get off yet, because CRJ has a tradition here. We like to close out most of our meetings on a real positive note, and a supportive note. So we do a chant by, okay.
Call and response.
This is the chant that we do.
Call and response.
Okay, call and response. So those of you who have been coming know how this goes. I will say the chant and you will repeat it. And what we will do each time, we will get louder and louder, and City Hall will hear us if they're not on. So we start by saying, it is our duty to fight for freedom.
It is our duty to fight for freedom.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We must love and protect one another.
We must
love
and protect one another.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
So you guys sound like you've either had dinner or waiting for dinner. Let's pick it up. It is our duty to fight for freedom.
It is our duty to fight for freedom.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We must love and protect one another.
We must love and protect one
We
another.
have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Okay, here we go, guys. Ready to eat dinner now. It is our duty to fight for freedom.
It is our duty to fight for freedom.
Come on, Karen, with an attitude. It is our duty to win.
It is our
Duty to win.
We must love and protect and support one another.
We must love and support one another.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Okay.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Good night, y'all.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank you for having me.
everyone.
Good night.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
George Brown said.